Oh, there she is. Hi, Jay.
Hi. Hi,
I
everyone.
was just looking for the button to click to let you in. So Jay's here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great that there are so many people.
I don't know who sent the question, but I think it doesn't matter. What are some aphantasia characteristics you and Hannah share? That was from the forum. So
Good question. Pretty much everything that I described in the novel is true for me. It's not true for all aphantasic people. I have to say that everyone with aphantasia experiences it a little different depending on whether or not all mental senses are affected. For me and for Hannah, everything is affected. So I personally don't have mental images. I also don't have mental sound, or I can taste or smell anything in my mind. And all of the little quirks that Hannah describes and the little disadvantages, like there's this one scene where she gets lost in a neighborhood, even though she has been there before and she doesn't remember. Or Valentina tells the story about Hannah getting lost in a restaurant on the way back from the restroom. Hello, that's me. Yeah, so, or when she and Winter watch Legends of Tomorrow, this TV show, and she says it took her like half a season to keep the characters apart because to her they looked similar, because they were similar ages, both have the same hair color, and she jokingly says it should be forbidden to cast two blondes in the same TV show. Yeah, that's all true for me too. It took me a long time to keep them apart. Once I know a face, I probably remember it, but I struggle with faces in general. I struggle with sense of orientation. So yeah, everything I mentioned for Hannah is true for me too.
Following up on that, can you talk a little bit? I know that you always often post pictures for us to see of the places that your writing is about. I know for Paper Love and for different books, you'll post the pictures. Does that aid you in your writing as well, the aphantasia?
I do it as part of my research. So I know how to describe the places and the things that I'm describing in my stories. And then afterwards, I put it together for my readers to follow along while they read. I know that most readers will also have images when I'm describing things, but when I'm describing things in a story, it's just words. And so I need to see the images to be able to describe it. And when I have just the words, it doesn't translate to images for me. And I'm hoping that seeing the pictures will also help those readers who maybe can't visualize or who can't visualize as well, because it's a spectrum. It's not required to enjoy the story, but I'm hoping it will allow the readers who maybe struggle with the same things to follow along.
I do have a question from Evie Bancroft. Why do you base most of your USA books in Portland? Is there a connection there for you?
I think it started with the very first book I wrote that I then set in Portland because I visited Portland and I found it for a US city very European. It has a very European flair. And it kind of felt like home away from home for me. And so I started setting a couple of books there. And I think everyone who's read more than one of my books knows that I like to connect my stories. And so I set the books in the same city so that my characters can know each other. For example, in Just a Touch Away, there's Dawn from Conflict of Interest, who makes an appearance, because I figure my characters, they need friends and they need co-workers. And so I might as well have a character from a previous book so that it's like an inside joke that I share with my loyal readers who will be like, oh, I know her. And so naturally that means setting the book in the same city, or like I have maybe two cities that I set them in some are set in California, like the Hollywood series Naturally. And then a lot of the others are set in Portland.
Okay. Jamie, can I have a question from MR. I'm really impressed with the difficult topics of your books. Or with the difficult topics your books are willing to deal with in the context of romance. Do you think the different issues make the characters more or less interesting? And do you think they make the books more or less popular?
I don't know if they make them more popular. I think it makes them more real. I mean, if you look at people, everyone has something they struggle with, or a difficult family history, or everyone's brain works differently. They have their scars from growing up or from previous relationships. And I think romance get this reputation of being unrealistic or fluffy stuff, you know, but I think that's not necessarily true. Quite the opposite, because we know a romance will have a happy ending, and for sure all of my books do. There's more space to bring up difficult topics without making the book depressing. It's all in the balance. I think Just a Touch Away, it has a lot of hilarious moments, but I mean, if you look at Winter's family history, it also has some very heavy stuff. So I think it's all in finding the right balance and portraying the whole spectrum of human emotions.
I have a question from Michelle. What gave you the idea to use the dueling welcome mats? I thought it was a hilarious way to see the difference in the characters.
I don't even know where that idea came from. And I think that's, if us writers were completely honest, a lot of the time we just don't know where the ideas come from. It's just, if you are inside of the mind of a character, it just felt like something they would do. I mean, Winter is very competitive, so she's used to that from her relationship with Brooke. They turn everything into this competition. And of course, she can't just let it go. And the doormat with little hearts is so not, how does she say, on brand. So she, of course, has to remove it. And I think the core of Hannah's personality is she's very giving and kind, but at the same time, she also learned how to set boundaries. And so she's not a doormat, you know, she doesn't let people walk all over her. So, of course, she has to replace Winter's doormat or stop Winter from replacing hers. And so that kind of made for a very fun sequence. I think that was one of the most fun sequences to write in the entire book.
I have a question from Mary Jean. How do you learn about professional cuddlers, and why did you choose it for Hannah in this book?
I'll answer the second part first. I came across professional cuddling the way that Shan, Winter's friend in the book, says she learned about it by reading an article about the 10 most unusual jobs in the world. And as soon as I heard, wow, professional cuddling, wow, that's a thing, I knew I had to use it in a book at some time. I mean, professional cuddling romance, that's just, yeah, it seemed perfect. And I also knew I have to, the love interest has to be someone who's her polar opposite, and who is aloof and doesn't like people in her space. And the first thing I always do when I have a core idea for a story is to do way too much research. I always do a lot more research than I actually need for the book. For Just a Touch Away, I actually did the theoretical part of the certification that you can do to become a professional cuddler. And you learn all about their code of conduct and their how to conduct a session, how to structure it, the different cuddle positions, and how to deal with arousal, things like that. So all but the practical parts of the education of becoming a cuddler. That was the core part of my research. If we hadn't been in the middle of a pandemic, I probably would have also booked a cuddle session, but I drew the line there because, yeah, of COVID.
I have a question from Melina. Question for Jay. What does your writing process look like? Specifically, does it vary depending on the book genre? Backwards to Oregon being a historical and Just a Touch Away being a contemporary.
No, basically my process is pretty much always the same. Just how much time I spend on the different parts of my writing process, that differs a little from book to book. As you can imagine, a historical fiction involves a lot of research. I think I researched for like 9 months for Backwards to Oregon. So about as long or even longer than they were on the journey from Missouri to Oregon, I researched everything about life in the 1850s and the entire route, what they would eat and what dangers there would be. For Just a Touch Away, it was still a lot of research, but not as much as for Backwards to Oregon, of course. But my process always starts with the research because it gives me ideas. Okay, what scenes could I write? And the next step is always the characters, and I write very extensive character profiles for each of the main characters. I know everything about their childhoods, their former relationships, friendships, education, their psychology, their strengths and their weaknesses, and what kind of transformation they undergo during the course of the story. So I have an entire dossier on all of them, including what they look like, because I don't have that image in my mind. So I can go back to it. And then I plot, but I don't plot every little scene. I just know the major turning points and leave a lot of room in between so that the story can grow organically. And sometimes the characters surprise me, and it takes a little twist, so I have to readjust the outline that I planned.
I have some questions from Ellen. Ellen, your questions are very have the topic with aphantasia. If you want, we can do this in the third part. Is that okay for you, Ellen? Yeah, it's okay because they're very specific. And then I have a question from Sue. Oh, I'm really enjoying the contemporary cultural reference in this book. I was delighted to hear that Hannah's friend play Catan. Do you play Catan yourself?
I've played it. I'm a big fan of board games. So when several of my friends and I get together, we usually do play board games. So yeah.
Okay.
I have a question kind of following up on the character development that you're talking about from Joanna. She says, I am from Brazil and instantly felt connected to Valentina. How was your creative process in creating that character, and what inspired you to create her?
I love making my book worlds as diverse and as inclusive as makes sense for the setting. And I know Portland is not the most diverse city, but still not everyone is white and cis. And so I love, like Heather, for example, she's trans, and I knew that the cuddling community is also very diverse. A lot of them are pansexual, bisexual, or anything but straight. And for Valentina, I decided to make her Brazilian American because I know I have a lot of readers who are from Brazil. And so they were inspired by the readers I know. And was also really helpful in creating her because I'm not from Brazil, obviously. And so I looked for beta readers who could tell me when I'm writing her wrong or she doesn't feel authentic, and who also told me little phrases she could say, because especially when she's returning from a visit to Brazil, she kind of mixes a little Portuguese into her language. So she says she had to go back to maintain the Brazilian sexiness. Yeah, so my readers really helped with that.
Okay. Jamie? Oh, I have.
Sorry, I was muted just in case my dogs barked. Okay. From Caroline, a lot of your characters are physically normal, quote unquote, like not Hollywood perfect. Same for sex scenes. It's not all picture perfect. Why?
Again, I want my characters to be real. Just everyday people. Even I think my Hollywood series is mostly down to earth people. You know, of course, the actresses look maybe a little better in quotation marks than average because their job requires it. But I think some of my most popular characters are like Danny from Wrong Number, Right Woman, who has love handles and is shy, because I feel that what is or isn't attractive is very subjective, and there's no better or worse. You know, there's a lot of beauty in diverse body shapes, and I feel like we shouldn't just have this one shape that gets held up as the standard of beauty, and everything else somehow feels inferior to that. So I include that in my books because that's my personal attitude.
I have another one. Does the cut from Evie Bancroft, does the Cuddle Sutra exist?
Yeah. I actually have it right here because this is the German version. I am doing a giveaway right now for my German readers. It actually exists, and the title is the Cuddle Sutra, and it has all of these illustrations. Not all of the ones that Winter and Hannah do in the book, or that Hannah does with clients, are in the book. I actually think the koala in a tree isn't in here, but I'm not sure. I have to look it up. But there are a lot of fun ones. The more unusual ones are in there, like the one that Winter comments on. She says, like, how does that not get sexual? Splish splash, things like that. Yeah, it exists.
That's awesome. Michelle says, I love all of your books, but Wrong Number, Right Woman is my favorite. Will Heather get her own story at some point?
Probably, yeah. I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to do it because I want to be respectful of the trans community, since I'm not trans. I will, of course, work with sensitivity readers who can guide me. I've already done a ton of research when I first included Heather in Wrong Number, and she has also made an appearance in several of my other books. But yeah, I already have an idea for her.
Okay. I have two questions. They're actually the same, from Sandy and from Yvonne. The question is, are you planning to write a sequel about Winter's sister, about Brooke?
Yeah, that will be, right now I'm in the middle of writing an unrelated book, but after that, probably the next one will be about Brooke. She already let me know in the very first scene that she showed up that she needs her own book. So yeah, she will get it.
Jess is asking, if you could pick a team in the doormat war, who would it be? Team Hannah or Team Winter?
Difficult. On the one hand, I'm more like Hannah. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings by making them feel unwelcome. But I'm also on Winter's side because I also don't want people to invade my castle all the time, and I don't like surprise visits. I I would probably go with the plain doormat that they compromised on in the end, but I also really like the second one that Winter got, that said welcome-ish. It depends on who you are. So if I'm totally honest, that probably would be my doormat. So yeah.
I too. Yeah, I have a question from Danielle. I could relate to Winter's jealousy about Hannah's job. Was this inspired by your own thoughts if you would have a partner who was a professional cutler?
I don't tend to be the jealous type, but I felt it would be totally natural for most partners. I mean, cuddling is very intimate, and I think 99.9% of people are used to cuddling only with their romantic partner. Maybe with family members, but as we get older, that gets less and less. Maybe some cuddle with friends, but even that, it's not the norm. I feel like it's mostly restricted to romantic partners. So that's what we connected with. And cuddling as more of a client relationship, that's a very unusual thought. And I could totally understand that it's a tough thing for a partner. And especially someone like Winter, who she tends to be a little possessive and controlling, not in a bad way or in a totally dysfunctional way, but she has a lot to learn about intimacy and the different types of intimacy. So I felt like the story wouldn't feel complete if I didn't bring that up.
Kaz is asking, would you book a cuddle session today now that COVID things are calming down?
I'm still a little more careful about COVID than the average, I think. So right now, probably I wouldn't feel comfortable because I don't know the other person's history. In general, if like COVID weren't a thing at all, I probably would have booked one just as part of my research, just to see what it's like. I would have probably taken weeks to pick the right cuddler and to pick someone I feel like, okay, I could be comfortable with her. But just to see what it feels like, if it gives me any ideas for the book, I probably would have done it, yeah.
How do you create your protagonist's perfect romantic partner?
Usually someone who has the same values to make them compatible, but who otherwise is the complete opposite, or at least opposite enough so that they can learn from each other and complete each other. Because there's, in most romances, and that's part of what I enjoy so much about writing them, there's a transformation. You can see it in just a touch away of how much Winter changes. I mean, at the core, she remains herself. We wouldn't want her to not be Winter in the end, but she gets a lot of healing going on. And so she needs someone. If she met someone who would be the same as her, they would never get together. They would each be in their office and talk maybe once a day about coffee, and that's it. And so for there to be any change, they need to be really opposite, so that they can learn from each other. Like, for example, Hannah probably wouldn't have taken that step to go out by herself, and to leave the cuddle company she was with, even though she wanted to do it for ages, but she didn't have the marketing skills. So even though Hannah had less of a growing curve, even she changed a little or took steps that she wouldn't have taken without Winter, because Winter is the more confident person. That's how I think you can see the same core idea, the same dynamic in most of my romances, that they complete each other, they challenge each other, and they learn from each other's strengths and kind of balance each other's weaknesses out a little. So it's I've been told I write like a psychologist, and that's probably true.
I loved how you kind of unpacked and wove the story of them starting further apart on the couch and the distance getting less and less until we have that scene under the sink.
Mhm.
And I'm like, is that part of why you made that first kiss happen under the sink in those close quarters where the distance wasn't so far to bridge?
Yeah, I knew I had to get them close together, and I also knew that first kiss had to be initiated by Hannah, because Winter made a promise she wouldn't try anything like that again, even though it wasn't the same at all. The context was very different and the meaning behind it was very different, but I knew it would be important to her to stick to that promise, so I had to navigate them into a situation where she can't back away.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's what I came up with.
That was brilliant, brilliant. Cass is asking, can I just mention the kitten comment? That's just hilarious. Where did that come from?
That's another one where I have no idea, but I think she means the one when, yeah, I liked how Winter, like what makes a romance for me as a reader work is if it's not just between the two characters, but their lives kind of collide, and Winter has to interact with all of Hannah's cuddle friends, and she feels like she doesn't fit in at all. When Tina invites her to games night and asks her if she eats pizza, and she says, only if I run out of newborn kittens, and then makes that comment about, yeah, it's so tough to get all the hair and the fur out of her teeth. That's just Winter kind of hiding her insecurities. She hides behind sarcastic comments and her sarcastic wit. And that's what made her such fun to write. Yeah, so I don't know how in particular I came up with it, but that's how my brain ticks.
I have another question from Jess. If you could only pick one, would it be the espresso machine or the squirrel taking a dump tea diffuser?
Oh. I drink both coffee and tea, so that's a tough choice. Probably I would go with the espresso machine. The scribble is very funny, and I've given that same scribble to my sister and to a friend as a gift. So that inspired that. But I think most of my stories are fueled by coffee, so I go with the espresso machine.
Okay.
Mary, do you have?
We can, if you want, can go to the part 3, if you want. Then I think there will be more questions related to touch, the boundaries, and aphantasia. Or if anybody has a different or another question from the book, then please say yes or no.
Quick, just me. I have a question that was sent to me by Marielle. Sorry if I butcher it. This is for Jay. Do you have emergency sprinkles?
No, I don't even have ice cream in my freezer right now. Ice cream is more like I would eat it if it were in my freezer. That's the problem, so I don't buy it. I only have ice cream for special celebrations, like when I finish a book. And I'm actually more of a purist when it comes to ice cream, so no whipped cream and no sprinkles.
Actually, I have some questions from Mary Jean. Just want to say I found several of your books to be ones I think you should be winding read by everyone, not just Sapphic romance readers. Thank you. It's just not a question, it's just a comment. Nice reply. Then from Pa, how do you think of fake streets or building the one Winter gets sent to?
Mostly I base everything on real places. A lot of the time I use the places as they are in real life and name them as such. but sometimes, like the building where Hannah and Winter live, it really exists, and I describe it exactly as it looks. It's actually the building where Heather and Eliza live in Wrong Number, Right Woman when the book starts. And Heather still lives there, but Eliza moved out to live with Danny. But sometimes I base a location, like right now I'm working on a book and the restaurant where they're going, I base the location and how I describe it on another restaurant that really exists, but change the name to fit the story. So it's most of the time based on something that exists in real life.
Okay.
Just a quick question. I think Lisa wants to know what flavor. I'm assuming ice cream. Ice cream discussion.
My favorite is peanut butter, which is not that easy to find in Germany for some very strange reason.
For all the right reasons.
Okay. So that's all the ones that I have. If we're ready to
I have one
shift
from
over.
Heidru Maria. What will be your next project?
The one I'm working on right now is probably the title that it will also have when it's published is Bachelorette number 12. It's enemies to lovers, ice cream, medical romance. So apparently I'm on an ice cream trip. I don't know. It's about a nurse and a doctor in the ER who constantly clash at work, so they don't get along at all. And then the doctor lets herself be talked into participating in a singles auction, and the nurse accidentally bids on her and ends up being the winning bidder. And since it's for a good cause, they have to go on a series of dates with each other, and yeah, in the process discover that maybe they don't hate each other as much as they thought.
Okay.
That sounds amazing.
It's a lot of fun, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Jamie, do you
That's all
want
you have,
to
Mary?
introduce us? Oh, wait, we have another one.
Okay.
Okay, from Ellen.
Mhm.
I found it so interesting that both characters had insights after Hannah and Winter's first cuddle sessions. Hannah, why Winter left, and Winter, why Brooke wanted her to have a cuddle session. Is that from your psychologist's background?
Probably, yeah. I think the first cuddle session is the major turning point of the entire story. It changed the entire dynamic because Winter felt so bad afterwards and so guilty, and she didn't want to be like her biological father, and that it forced her to interact with Hannah afterwards. She felt she owes her, and so that created that situation where she worked with Hannah on her cuddle business. And for Hannah, it was, like you said, it provided her a much deeper insight into Winter and the vulnerability she has, and that a lot of the stuff she does to keep people away is because she's scared of intimacy. And I think that insight, compared to Winter being forced to interact more with her, that changed the entire dynamic of the book. Without that scene, the entire book would have happened very differently.
And
So I'm mindful of the time. Should we go ahead and move to our next?
Yeah, I have one more question, and then now the questions arrived. Sabrina wants to know, did Just Away start out as novella?
No, Just a Touch Away didn't. But a lot of my other books, like the one I'm working on right now, was supposed to be a short story. Then it was supposed to be a novella, and now it's a novel.
Okay.
Well, Jay, thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here and sharing this time with us. It's been really, really great. And thank you all for being with us as well.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Bye, thanks for coming.